Hey everyone, Larry Walsh here at Channelnomics. Issue that has just been a part of the channel fabric forever and just won't go away is how do we prove partners are actually contributing to our success? How do we show that partners are driving sales, driving revenue, are contributing to the profitability, they're helping to drive a vendor towards its goals? How do we show that partners are not just coasting along in draining resources? And how do we also show that salespeople actually gain more by working with partners than trying to go it alone? Channel attribution has been a challenge for vendors since the day the channel was born. And for a myriad of reasons is that it's easy. It's really easy for everyone to take credit because we're all in sales. Everyone in the go-to-market process has a take on what they did in order to capture revenue, capture a customer, and drive that next engagement. Boards of directors, shareholders, stakeholders, and those in the C-suite, they recognize the value of the channel, at least from a functional perspective. They know that they can't go to market alone. They know that the partners are there to help cover the total addressable market and to reach the customers that they can't reach through their direct sales. What is more problematic is proving it, proving that the partners, that the channel is actually worth the expense. And that's what channel attribution is all about. And when I say we've been dealing with this, it's just something that just keeps coming up, and we keep coming up with new ways of showing it. And yet those that want answers keep coming up with new ways of doubting it. So this is something that we at Channelnomics are working on diligently. It's a part of our core offerings for 2026. We're introducing new models and new services around attribution mapping, around internal organizational alignment, enhanced total economic impact, and also measuring and defining return on channel investment. This is all about creating optimized and positive channels. And this is a hugely important issue because if we are going to continue to work with partners, then we're going to have to make sure that we are giving them the proper credit, and that credit permeates from the top to the bottom. This is why we invited two great people, two great and experienced people, I should say, to discuss this. First, Frank Rauch, our expert in residence here at Channelnomics, and then one of the drivers of our new services around attribution, will be joining us along with Joe Sykora, the new CEO of Coro Cybersecurity. He's also been in the role of a channel leader as well as a sales leader and has experience at all sides of this issue. It's a great conversation. Let's get into it. Joe Sykora, Frank Rauch, thanks for joining us.
Thank you,
Thanks
Larry.
for having us. Larry, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Joe.
You too, Frank.
Yeah, it's good, Joe, that they have internet in Tennessee.
They do. It's sort of new. I actually got fiber to the house and everything. It's kind of crazy, right? It's kind of crazy.
Enough brand will do you good, right? So, all right. So let's get into our conversation here. We want to talk about channel attribution, partner contributions, and the attributions associated with it. Guys, the three of us have had this conversation in various forms a few times. I want to start off with, why are we having it now? I've been, we've all been in this business for a couple of decades. We've always talked about the channel and partnerships as being a force multiplier. That is something that is allowing the vendors that you work for and support, that allows you to extend your market coverage and reach customers and do it more cost effectively. And yet there's always this level of doubt. Joe, from your perspective, you sat on both sides of the fence here, and you CPO, channel chief, now CEO. What's the problem that we're dealing with here? What don't people get?
Well, listen, I don't know if this is it's not a new problem, Larry. I think, and this goes beyond channel even, it's always attribution, right? Even if you look at anything to do with spending money, what does everyone want? Some type of return, right? And some way to track that return. So I think that things have changed. We started out many, many, many years ago doing deal registrations. That was a binary 1 and 0, but it really wasn't. Right? I mean, there's still a lot of gray area, because if you talk to anyone in the field or field leadership, what's the first thing they said? I gave them the deal registration because I was a nice guy, right? Or something like that. So there was always this, I think, like you said, I've been on both sides, and whenever I was on the side where the field team was like, well, we really did all the work. Listen, it's multi-attribution, right? Anytime you do an opportunity, you close a deal, there's so many different touches from so many different people. It's making sure you have that accountability and at least show some type of direction. So I think why we're still dealing with today is no one's perfected it. To my knowledge, I've had a couple different models. Most of the time, in my side of things, it was more of a macro, right? Because you can't argue the macro. What is our contribution we got by using a channel? Did it help us grow faster than when we were on our own? Usually you have the data there to prove that. Now that things are different, right? Like you said, I'm on the other side of the fence now. So now I get to go to my channel people and my sales people and say, show me what you've done for me lately. I made the decision to go 100% channel. So I don't have that mixed environment, but I'm still pushing them, right? I'm still pushing them for show me what the channel partners did. What did they bring to us versus what we gave to them? I have to talk to, my new boss is the board, right? I'm talking to the board on a regular basis, and I have to give them, we made this investment of X and this is what we saw as a return. So, I think that's why we're still talking about it. And I think we'll still continue to talk about it as things continue to change because, deals aren't as simple as they used to be, right? It's not I want to buy this and I can attribute to this action.
Frank, and everyone, I should reiterate that Frank Rauch, I mean, and I think this is an understatement to say that Frank is one of the legends of our business.
I was going to say we should give him a chain or something that says legend.
We really should. I mean,
Oh,
at least gold, if not platinum, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But Frank joined Channelnomics last summer as an expert in residence, and he and I have been working on this attribution issue. Frank, you've been more than a few shops. You've really cut your teeth at different places like VMware and
mhm.
HP and Checkpoint. You brought this to my attention as an issue that we should be prioritizing. What's your experience with this?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it really is, it's an issue of speed, relevancy, and alignment. I'll explain to you what I mean. I don't think you realize, you serve many masters when you're in that channel. You're serving the CRO, oftentimes you're serving the CMO, basically sales leaders, but now it's been elevated. I mean, if you look at the quarterly earnings calls, different financial reports, different comments they're being made by some of the biggest CEOs in the industry, channel is kind of front and center, and the business has changed. I mean, you used to get pretty much of a flat quota, whether you were channel or you were a direct salesperson. Now we're talking ARR, MRR, RPO, different terms mean different things. And I think, when you talk about the problem, it really comes from one word in my mind, which is basically misalignment. Oftentimes the CRO or the CFO is less amused by how many badges were scanned at a particular show, how many drinks were served at a particular event. And the game has really changed because now the expectations are higher of the channel, but they're also higher all the way up the board. And when you're talking to the board, you need to be able to find a way. And I know we use the word attribution. Attribution is one word. That's like kind of keeping score. But if you focus only on the final score, you're probably going to lose the game. So it's these growing metrics that grow within inside of a quarter, that grow within inside of a year. And basically it's the alignment of what the channel does, how you manage the channel relative to the corporate goals. I think, so attribution is going to pay, well, you keep your job or you don't keep your job. But attribution can also be how many resources are you going to get for next year? How do you figure in the annual operating plan? That's complicated.
I want to go back to something you said, Frank, about alignment. And this is something that we've been working with. We developed an alignment methodology in 24 to measure how well teams, so the C-suite, to sales, marketing, how they all view the channel and whether or not they believe it's valuable and worth supporting. And our premise of it is that if you don't have that cross-functional support, because the partner program doesn't operate in a vacuum, then it's not going to do a lot. And Frank, you also brought up the notion that the boards care. And Joe, I'll be interested to hear what you have to say about this too, because you have to report to a board. And I believe the boards actually do want to know about these things. But interestingly, when we go and look at the earnings reports and we go and listen to the earnings calls, channels never get mentioned. I mean, rarely do partnerships, unless there's some high level, high profile alignment with another vendor, they don't get any type of credit on the quarterly or the annual earnings calls. So how important is it, first, before we even get into attribution, to start talking about internal alignment and making sure everybody's on board and understands the value?
I'll give you kind of my timeline, how it's changed and what it really is now. So I had really the opportunity and the honor of working with the board at HPE, at VMware, even Dell for that matter, as well as Kiddo and Checkpoint. And it's changed because usually, basically once a year or whatever the case may be, channel used to be mentioned, etc. Now it's really, really different. I mean, it's not that unusual to be able to have a standing slide on your quarterly board meetings for the channel. That's
Mhm.
how important it is. And that's the good news and the bad news. First time you're invited to me, wow, I got invited to a board meeting. Second time is, wow, I need to spend 2 months before the quarter ends to be able to prepare for the board meeting because questions are different, they're better, and they're good. But here's the magic. The magic is basically if you really understand, and it's not just about the board, what your C-suite is really, really cares about and how they're measuring the business. And you can reverse engineer back into the channel manager, the channel program, etc. You can win the game. And I don't think that was true literally 10 years ago, maybe not even 5 years ago.
Well, I think, but it's changed, right? Look at all the change that we've all gone through. Like you said, Larry, we've been doing this for a while. In the last few years, just look the amount of change that has happened just in the routes to market in different things, right? Um, one of the things that when I was just a channel leader, it was very, very important to level set what mattered. So, like what Frank said, getting aligned with the corporate plan, then more importantly, having everyone agree to a set of metrics that is standard. That's probably the number one thing that I see, because I do try to do some give back and mentoring of new channel leaders coming up. They always struggle with, how do I prove myself, my worth, and everything else, which is the topic we're talking about. It starts with those metrics, right? Agree on the reporting that everyone's going to abide by. You update it, whether it goes all the way to the board or it's something that's internal. Level setting that is super important. That involves staff, right? It involves your CEO, involves your CFO. Very important to involve the CFO to say, what does good look like, right? If you can agree on that, that's step one, right? Because if you don't, you're just going to be spending a lot. You'll be spinning your tires because you'll be chasing this goal that always changes. So get people to agree upon that. It's the same thing I did here, right? And it's the same thing I do with the board level discussion, is first defining, what do we want to look at and what does good look like, right? Now, listen, and this, there's many different benchmarks out there, right? For any size business, there's channel benchmarks, there's business benchmarks. What does good look like? What does great look like? What does bad look like? And that's been a lot of, I've always used that, but I'm using that on a daily basis now because it's important, right? Because what do all businesses want? They want some type of exit, right? Whether you're public, you want to have positive earnings and your stock to go up. If you're private, you either want to go public or you want to get acquired. You want to have an exit. So I think it's really important to take a look at industry benchmarks, but also defining your internal benchmarks to say, is what we're doing making a difference? Right? Because it is multiple attribution, right? There's no one thing that closes a deal. And you're right. You mentioned I've worked in mixed environments, right? And that's probably, as a channel leader, that's the toughest environment to be in, is when you sell both direct and indirect, because all you're going to hear about, like on the earnings calls and everything else, is we won this deal. It's not, we won this deal with this partner, unless it's significant, right? I think that's something that I've seen through the years on my side involving the channel. You have to have, and as a channel leader, that you're kind of like that. You are the cheerleader, right? You're the person internally and externally that needs to make sure that the reporting set up, and more importantly, if you're doing a good job or have a win, you have to make sure that celebration is heard and validated and acknowledged, right, for your channel partners.
Yeah. And Larry, if I could
Yeah.
just add on to that. So as normal, I agree with you. We're normally pretty well aligned, and I am thrilled to see him get that job. And I think it's a good statement for the channel. And I continue to learn from him. But I think, you know, when we say the word attribution, I made this point a little bit before. We often think about the end game or the end point, the end data. It's really in being able to understand the interdependencies of getting to that attribution, not only that attribution. So, for example, so if you have RPO problems, remaining performance obligation, what can the channel do? How can the channel be incented to be able to burn down those contracts? If you have a just an NRR problem, net revenue retention. What could the channel do to be able to retain customers, to be able to drive day one, day two experience, but also to be able to cross sell and upsell? So it doesn't end with the final dashboard of the quarter or the final dashboard of the year. It starts way before that.
I hear what you're saying, Frank, and
Good.
I agree with you that that's what the book says.
The book does say that,
It,
Larry. I checked the book.
yeah, and I know
What book are we talking about?
The book.
the book.
About.
But look, there's certain realities though that run counter to that. The partner does not have a seat at the table. The partner is not in the weekly, monthly, or quarterly sales meeting. The partner doesn't get invited to the board. And you're right, focusing on the end number doesn't capture everything. But at the same time, there's a lot of intermediaries inside the vendor's organization that are both one, they want to take credit for what the partners did, and second, they get compensated for taking credit,
Yeah.
right? So how much of this is cultural as opposed to just attribution in CRM or PRM?
Well, again, I'll go back to the point that I made earlier. So if all of a sudden you're waiting till the end of whatever period, and basically the numbers flash up, and people are seeing them for the first time, everybody is going to take credit for them.
Yeah.
Now rewind 3 months prior, 4 months prior to the beginning of the year. Now you're in AOP season and you're planning your annual operating plan. If you then define the beginning metrics, the pre-metrics of what the channel is going to do, why they're going to do it, how they're going to be trained to be able to do it, when they do it, you can claim attribution. Claiming attribution is at the end game. The end game is exactly what Joe said. It's basically getting that exit or getting that return. It's getting the better stock price. It's beating the number, whatever the case may be. If you have in your plan how and why you're going to invest in the channel and what the channel role is going to be, then nobody should be surprised when you get to the number.
One of the things you brought up, Larry, around compensation, I think that's something that is very important, I think, for everyone out there to understand. If you have a compensation plan for your field team or your channel team that creates conflict, that's the first thing you need to go and fix, right? Because I've seen so many situations, because you're right, comp plans create behaviors. And if you create the behavior of you will get compensated differently if you do the deal or you do the deal with a partner, vice versa, you have this conflict and again, conflict in an organization isn't a bad thing. In fact, as a CEO, I'll tell you, sometimes I design plans to have a little bit of competition. You can call that conflict because it is deliberate, right? But the overarching how people get paid, if you're a salesperson and you have an organization that has a mixed model or a direct sales force, even direct led, you want to make sure that compensation is net neutral. In fact, if you're really good, you can sell the fact that you actually get paid more for going through channel partners. That was a thing in the past. I think we did that 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We were all putting together comp plans that did that. When our organizations came to us and said, we want to embrace the channel more, it's one thing you can do. But that's one thing, and this goes back to the alignment with finance and your CFO. It's so important to build those compensation plans or have influence on the compensation plans. So at least it's a fair field, right? If it's not a level playing field, you're in for some special times because trust me, I think we all know salespeople. Some of us could say we're all salespeople. I would do whatever it takes to monetize the most I can. But how can I put more money in my pocket? You're going to have that conflict, right? So that's one thing as a channel leader, you need to make sure you have a seat at the table, or at least some influence when comp plans are being designed. It goes back to that relationship. We talked a lot about having relationships with E-staff, with your CRO, your C-suite. It's important, right? And it's important for you to understand why. I see some channel leaders that just do well, that's what they told me I had to do, so I did it, right? You're setting yourself up for failure when you do things like that, because it's just as important as setting that up, because getting credit for a sale, a closed deal, something like that, everyone should be celebrating. So I've always strived for plans. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes I wasn't. I've always strived for plans that either I hate to use the word shared number, because of course, then we get into distinct quota versus overlay quota, but there should not be a benefit to a salesperson to go direct and or say that the channel didn't bring me in. That's an age-old problem, I think, that a lot of people are probably still struggling to solve, because it needs to be solved, right? And it goes back to leadership. You have to have everyone bought in.
Yeah. I remember when I went to channel school, if there was such a thing.
Is that where the book was?
It was.
That's where the book was that we all read, was Channel School. Yes.
That was in Florida, I think, or something, right? So
or Vegas.
Vegas. It had to be. And I think we all left it there.
Yes.
But, one of the things that actually one of my mentors taught me early on was that the channel has to be a net exporter. It's not a center onto itself. It has to contribute to the goals of the other parts of the organization, which is why I think alignment is such a big issue. And last fall, I led a couple of workshops on this around, how do you demonstrate value? What are the KPIs, the key performance indicators? And I came up and leading this conversation, I said, there's 3 levels here. And I want to know if you guys agree with this. There's 3 levels. The first level is the imperatives. What is it the audience, whether it's the board, the C-suite, or the head of sales, what are the things that they care about most, and what is it that they need to report on themselves? Those are your imperatives. Then you have the next level down to the adjacencies, the metrics that you use to come to the imperatives, but you don't need to report on them. I don't care how many deal registrations you have. And then there's a final one, which we call field facts, which are the pieces of data that everybody can get their hands on that don't mean anything, but everybody loves to report on them. And I just said, you can just toss those aside. Is there enough of that trio? And I'm not saying that that's the right way of doing it. It's just a way we came up with on an hour-long conversation. But is there enough of that level of triaging going on where you're having those, to your point, Frank, everybody has to have this agreement that we all agree up front, this is what the numbers are and this is what they're supposed to be.
Yeah. I think, Larry, you used the phrase a lot, and it's separating the signal from the noise.
Yeah.
There's way, way too much noise. And the reason, I'll even equate the word noise with excuses, because it really is. Talk about meaningless metrics, or you add metrics into a period when you happen to hit the real metrics. So,
Right.
basically, I think it's, I go back to what Joe said. Basically, it's accountability, responsibility, and it's leadership. And you need to be able to just have really, really candid conversations with people that are calling the shots in the organization. Be one of those people and establish absolute clarity of what really is the signal. But when you say signal, it's not the end result. It's also the leading indicators. So nobody's surprised when you get there, when you don't get there, and go from there. But without that, I think, you just don't have organizational clarity. And if you look at some of the most crazy channel failures that all 3 of us have seen in our careers, I'll tell you, it centers around that issue.
So whether it's important or not.
Is there have you, either one of you, been asked a question saying, look, validate this for me, being asked for a number or an attribution that you can't answer?
I can go first on that one while Frank thinks it over. 100%. I think early on in organizations, and I haven't been that many organizations, there's always I don't have the data the way I want, or historics, right? Getting can we do a comparison quarter over quarter, year over year? If it's not apples to apples, it's a very difficult thing to do. I've been part of organizations that, the deal registration in rules around deal registration changed and how we handle different things. And if you're not dealing with apples to apples, it's very difficult to then justify. Sometimes it looks better, right? But, I've been the guy that said, the reason this is a false data point because we changed the rules or we changed the game. So of course it's going to look better. One of the companies I was at, we did a mandatory uplift, right? Which gave us a false, hey, we did a lot better. It was an uplift, right?
Mhm.
If you uplift things, but I like to make sure to call things out because again, the transparency is super important because maybe it won't be in your favor the next time and having that transparency in history. But that is, I've been questioned before on numbers. The organization I'm with right now, I've been here a little over 9 months. I haven't even been here a year. There are still things, right, that on the historics that I can't give a valid comparison to because I've changed the business so much in the last 10 months. Those are things. My advice is just be upfront and honest about it. And sometimes the answer is okay with either A, I need to do research or I don't have it available, right? It's okay to say that. The worst thing you can do is make it up, right? I've seen that too. I've seen that mistake too many times where someone makes numbers up or makes things up where it gets so bad because then once you say it, then you always have to report on it. It's better just to say, hey, I don't know, or I need to do more research or I'll get back with you.
Yeah. And I'll add, because I'll go back to kind of what Joe said. I think the problem started either bottoms up or top down. Bottoms up starts when that channel chief comes into that room, whatever that room may be, and it's a scorecard that shows all green and company's in trouble, and all of a sudden the metrics are totally misaligned. I've seen it happen before. It's very uncomfortable, but it's usually because the planning, the fault is in the planning. It's not in the metrics. I can tell you at the macro level too. Macro level is, basically tell the emperor that the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. So normally it's some belief that happens way, way up in the organization, either as a result of a merger or an acquisition that somebody pretty much put a big bet on, and not only bet on the success, but on that timeline. And all of a sudden, everybody underneath that individual has to prove it to be true. And that's where you really, really get caught in a bad trap, but hard to avoid.
All right. So, guys, great conversation, but I want to exit on an action here. Obviously, this is one of the things we do at Channelnomics is we do a lot of work around attribution mapping, alignment, and alignment optimization, and demonstrating economic impact and return on channel investment. But if you Joe, for one of your CEO peers, and Frank, one of your former channel chief colleagues, say, okay, where do I start with this? What's the start line?
There's metrics out there, Larry, right? And I think if I could give advice, it's interesting because with this new role, I've been introduced to a lot of startups. And I know, Frank, you've dealt with a lot of startups. And I think all three of us have dealt with a lot of startups. So I'm dealing with these younger 20 something that just, they don't know, right? And they then come to me and ask questions about go to market. We talk about business. They understand the basics, I think, of baseline. But when it comes to the routes to market, they love to talk about channel versus direct and everything else. And they ask, they're like, well, where do I start? And you have to start with some type of framework, right? And there are a lot of frameworks out there. I lean heavily on consultants. I mean, I always have. I value people who have been there, done that, and that have tried different things and have seen different things because, it's a great starting point and it fast tracks it. If you think you can my favorite now is people just tell me they're just going to go to AI and have them do the work. You're going to get, that's not going to work, right? It's not going to work. You really need to come up with some frameworks. Larry, you and I have talked on many, many occasions through many of the companies I've been with, and it's all around baselining. And then once we have a baseline, can we come up with a framework that either you've seen before, used before? That's my advice is don't think you have to make this stuff up on your own. It's okay to start with someone else's framework and then make adjustments, tweak it, and make it your own, right? I mean, no one's the same, but there's a lot of similarities when you're first starting.
Frank?
Yeah. Well, I would, Frank, Well, I would echo what Joe said. I think you can learn from a whole bunch of different places. You're going to learn some good things, and you're going to learn some bad things. I think consultants obviously is not just because you're hosting this podcast, but I think there is some macro level of learning that, and I think that basically the history can't predict the future. It can predict what you can avoid. The other thing I would say is be brave and be strong, because it takes a lot of guts to be able to go up to a CFO and specifically have that conversation, because you're going to be asked questions you probably aren't going to be able to answer, but to be able to answer what makes a successful year. How do you measure the channel? How do you think about the channel? What do we really need to do together to be able to grow this company? And what are the right metrics or the measurements to be able to find out if we're going to get there before the finish line? I think that's important. So I think it's those two things. I think you can look at the opposite and you can go, and here's the total opposite. You and all of us have seen this one. The people that take in a playbook and say, "Yeah, this worked." At my 5 last companies. Yeah, I know I was only there for a total of 6 months per company, but
Yeah.
it still worked.
No,
I'm gonna dust
Hey,
this baby off and let this magic play out in this new company. That's
hey,
where you're
listen,
gonna run.
Larry. No, the new way is feed that into AI, change it
I
a
was
little
gonna,
bit.
I
Well,
was
that's
say,
true, Joe. Good advice.
I was gonna say 60% of the time it works all the time, right, guys?
Yeah. There's a cologne like that. Listen, I think one of the other things too is the peer to peer. We may have it literally. I think I listen. The three of us have talked about a lot of different things. We bounced ideas off of each other. Frank, Frank and I have, and there a lot of us strategize. So the peer to peer, the networking, and there are groups out there as well. And I think some of that is invaluable. Right. I'll be honest. I'm blessed to have a pretty big network of people that have kind of been there, done that, and seen a lot. And sometimes I'll just text them and say, "Hey, what have you got to see? Right? What do you think?" And that's the other thing too that I do lean on is that right now. I've also been part of some groups where in the past, and this is early in my career, I was going to some of these peer to peer groups, and I felt I was answering a lot of things, but then I wasn't. When I had a question, everyone's like, "Never seen that one before. That's a good one. Let me know how you solve it." So it's been great through the years. I've been able to become friends with people like both of you, and there's a lot of experience that can't be replaced, right? You just can't replace some of the experiences that we've seen. And you're right, Frank. You can't just dust off the "Hey, it didn't." Well, especially if I've seen the "Hey, it didn't work at the other 6 places, but we'll try it here and see if it'll work again," because it won't. Obviously, something's wrong.
Yep.
So
Well, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time. For everyone listening in, if you made it this long, the advice here is sound. I mean, obviously, Channelnomics, this is something that we do. We have our methodologies for addressing attribution and return on investment. But as Joe and Frank both said, is that we're not the only ones. You can find a lot of great resources out there. The point is that is exactly what Joe said. You don't have to do it alone. So with that, Joe Sykora, Frank Rauch, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time.
thank you, Larry.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this edition of Changing Channels. Again, I want to thank our guest, Joe Sykora, the CEO of Coro Cybersecurity, and Frank Rauch, our expert in residence here at Channelnomics, for joining us. And as always, I want to thank all of you for joining us, and taking the time to listen to what we have to say. Changing Channels is here to help exchange knowledge and insights and experience. Ultimate goal is to help everybody do better in the channel. Please, if you like what we're doing, please hit like, hit subscribe, tell all your friends. If you're interested in more about the topic of attribution and the other economics of partnerships, check out the resources we have at Channelnomics, as well as in the show notes, there'll be links to additional content and resources you can check out. Also, don't forget to check out our other podcasts, The Network Effect and In the Margins, and all the best practices and research we have at Channelnomics. As always, thanks again. I'm Larry Walsh.